When we talk about maturity, we often imagine it as something that simply arrives with age, as though the mere passing of years carries wisdom in its wake. But that assumption is flawed. You can meet people who are well into their 50s or not 60s who still operate with the emotional reflexes of a child. And you can also meet someone in their 20s who carries the gravity, composure, and insight of a seasoned elder. What differentiates them is not the number of birthdays they've celebrated, but the depth of experience they've endured, and more importantly, how they've responded to it. It is pain, not time, that chisels the raw stone of human character into something resembling wisdom. Pain forces us out of comfort. Think about it. When everything in life is easy, when all circumstances bend to your will, you don't grow. You remain suspended in a kind of illusion where you believe you're in control, where you believe the world will always conform to your desires. But life doesn't play by those rules for long. Sooner or later, something breaks you. It could be the death of a loved one, the betrayal of a friend, the collapse of a dream, or the realization that the future you envisioned is no longer possible. And in that breaking, you are introduced to reality in its harshest form. It's not abstract anymore. It's visceral. It's undeniable. That's the moment damage begins to shape you, because it strips you of illusions you didn't even know you were carrying. This stripping away is essential. You cannot truly see the depth of life until something has cracked your comfortable surface. The philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche once said, "One must still have chaos in oneself to give birth to a dancing star." He understood that order and beauty often emerge only after one has encountered disorder and despair. Without the chaos of damage, you remain shallow. But when life breaks you open, you are confronted with the raw material of transformation. You are given a choice to collapse into bitterness and cynicism, or to use that pain as the fire that tempers your spirit. Think about resilience. It is not an inherited trait, it is earned. A tree that grows in a greenhouse, shielded from storms and wind, develops weak roots. It cannot withstand pressure because it has never been tested. But a tree growing on a cliffside, battered by gales, develops roots that cling with astonishing strength. Human beings are no different. Our strength does not come from living sheltered lives. It comes from facing the storm and choosing not to wither. Damage, in this sense, is not just something to be endured. It is the very condition that allows maturity to take root. But here is the paradox. We resist pain with all our might. We avoid discomfort. We numb ourselves with distractions. We insulate our lives against risk. And yet, by doing so, we delay or even prevent the very maturity we long for. To mature is to carry scars with dignity, to acknowledge that you've been through hell and back, and that you are still standing, not as the same person you were before, but as someone transformed. There's no shortcut to that. There's no way to purchase resilience, no way to inherit wisdom secondhand. You earn it step by step, wound by wound, choice by choice. Consider the young person who loses a parent early in life. They are forced, before they are ready, to confront mortality, responsibility, and grief. And often you'll find such individuals carrying a kind of seriousness, a depth of perspective that their peers can't comprehend. Compare that with someone who has lived, shielded from difficulty, whose family and circumstances have cushioned them from real struggle. Who is more mature? It isn't even a question. Damage has done what time alone could not. It has accelerated growth by exposing truths that can't be ignored. And what's remarkable is that in hindsight, many people recognize that the worst moments of their lives were also the most formative. They wouldn't wish those experiences on anyone, and yet they know they would not be who they are today without them. There's a strange gratitude that emerges because suffering, when integrated, becomes wisdom. It deepens empathy, it sharpens judgment, and it teaches humility. It reveals that you are not invincible, and that recognition is not a weakness, but a foundation for strength. Maturity then is not the passive result of living longer. It is the active result of suffering consciously. You do not become wise because the years rolled on. You become wise because you paid attention when life knocked you down. You became attentive to the lessons embedded in pain, and you refused to let them harden you into resentment. You let them shape you instead. So when we say we mature by damage and not by age, we are not glorifying suffering for its own sake. We are acknowledging an undeniable reality that life's hardest blows are also its greatest teachers. And the mark of a truly mature person is not that they have avoided those blows, but that they have endured them with enough courage to be transformed. The clock will keep ticking regardless, but the question you must ask yourself is this: will you allow your pain to make you bitter, or will you let it carve out the strength, resilience, and wisdom that age alone could never deliver? Because in the end, maturity is not about how long you've lived. It's about how deeply you've suffered, how honestly you've faced that suffering, and how courageously you've chosen to grow from it. And sometimes it takes the breaking of your life to reveal the strength of your soul. When damage comes into our lives, it doesn't just leave us with scars. It forces us into a confrontation with responsibility. Struggle places a demand on us. It asks whether we are going to collapse under its weight, or whether we are going to rise up and carry that burden with a sense of purpose. This is why maturity cannot be separated from responsibility. When life breaks you, you are not given the luxury of staying the same. You are called to transform. That transformation doesn't happen by accident. It happens because you make a choice to respond to struggle with courage rather than avoidance. It's tempting to think of responsibility as something imposed upon us from the outside. Duties, obligations, the expectations of others. But the kind of responsibility I'm speaking about here is deeper. It is an inner decision to take ownership of your suffering, to wrestle meaning out of pain rather than letting it consume you. This is where real maturity is born. The immature response to hardship is to blame, to withdraw, to wallow in bitterness. The mature response is to look in the mirror and ask, what must I do to rise above this? How can I shape myself into someone stronger, more capable, more compassionate because of this? And make no mistake, that is not an easy question to ask. When you're in the depths of struggle, the last thing you want to do is assume responsibility. It feels unfair, it feels overwhelming. But think about it, life doesn't stop being unfair just because you refuse to face it. You either take up the challenge willingly, or you get crushed by it. Responsibility is the only path out of chaos because it converts suffering into structure and damage into direction. Many of the people we admire most are not those who lived painless lives. They are the ones who were shattered and rebuilt themselves into something greater. The person who loses everything and still finds a way to serve others. The one who suffers injustice yet refuses to become hateful. These are not ordinary choices. They are the deliberate acts of responsibility in the face of despair. And through those acts, such people become transformed. They are no longer simply reacting to life. They are shaping it. That is the essence of maturity. To stop being merely the product of your circumstances and start being the architect of your character. Struggle humbles us too, and that humility is vital. Before hardship, we are often arrogant. We think we know ourselves, we think we know others, we think we know life. But damage strips away that arrogance, it shows us our fragility, and in that humbling moment, if we embrace responsibility, we are reshaped into something far more solid than pride could ever make us. We become capable of empathy because we know what it means to be broken. We become capable of discipline because we've seen what happens when chaos rules unchecked. We become capable of leadership because we've walked through fire and know the cost of survival. This is why you sometimes see younger people, those who have endured extraordinary burdens early in life, carrying themselves with a seriousness that seems beyond their years. It's not because they've had more time, it's because they've carried more weight. And carrying weight responsibly changes you. It transforms your relationship with yourself and with the world. Suddenly, trivialities don't consume you the same way. You begin to see clearly what matters, and you act accordingly. But there's always a choice embedded in struggle. Damage can harden you into cynicism, or it can soften you into wisdom. That's where responsibility enters again. To choose transformation is to refuse to become a victim of your suffering. It is to accept that while you did not choose the blow that struck you, you can choose how to respond. That choice is the birthplace of maturity because it is the first step toward freedom. You are no longer merely the sum of your wounds. You are the author of what those wounds mean. This is why I often say maturity is not measured by age, but by scars carried with integrity. Anyone can suffer, but not everyone transforms. Transformation requires responsibility. It requires you to integrate your struggle, to ask what lessons lie within it, and to act as though your life still has value and purpose, even when everything has been taken from you. That decision elevates you above the chaos. It turns damage into growth and suffering into strength. The danger, of course, is to think you can bypass this process, to imagine you can mature without taking responsibility, without wrestling with your own darkness. But those who try remain hollow. They may grow older, they may achieve outward success, but inside they are fragile, brittle, unable to withstand the storms of life. It is responsibility in the face of damage that gives a person depth. It is what allows them to stand firm when everything else falls apart. And so the challenge before each of us is not to avoid suffering, because suffering will come inevitably, but to decide in advance how we will meet it. Will we shrink back, retreat into bitterness, and let life crush us? Or will we rise, accept responsibility for our struggle, and allow it to forge us into someone stronger, someone capable of carrying not only our own burden, but perhaps helping others carry theirs as well? Because at the heart of it, maturity is not about how much time you've lived, but how much responsibility you've embraced. Damage may break you, but responsibility can rebuild you into someone more resilient, more grounded, more alive. And the truth is, the very struggles you wish you could avoid may be the exact forces that shape you into the person you were meant to become.